My next guest says he's proud of America and ashamed of what's happening to it. Joining me now to talk about this and other things is senior editor and writer for MSNBC Daily, Anthony Fisher. Anthony was previously the senior opinion editor for the Daily Beast and a politics columnist for Business Insider. More impressively, he's also my friend. Anthony, thanks so much for joining me.
Delighted to be here. It's been a while, so good to.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so you wrote a piece about this for MSNBC.com about being proud of America and ashamed of what's happening to it. And in this piece, you wrestled with the question of how proud are you to be an American? What was the impetus for this piece?
Gallup poll got a decent amount of top line was that 58% of Americans feel extremely or very proud to be an American. That is the lowest number of those two ratings of where you fit on the patriotism spectrum since Gallup started taking the poll in January of 01. I find very strange that they only started asking that question in January of 01, but that's what we've got to work with. And as I noted, basically Republicans have stayed well above 84%, like the whole time, so in the 24 years since. But a number of things, including the Iraq War, including the rise of Trump, saw sharp downturns among both Democrats and independents. And I think independents even right now are at a record low of saying that they're extremely or very proud. But there was if you look in the actual data, if you added mostly proud, like if you still had on the positive side, that's still where the majority, a large amount of Americans were. But I think that's healthy. I think that when people say that they're extremely proud or very proud, that's the kind of I don't want to say extreme patriotism, but it's certainly a more intense patriotism than I've felt comfortable with for a while.
That gets to a really important question, and that is, what does it mean to be patriotic? And I talked a little about this on our July 4th episode, but I'm curious how you answer that, because it gets to what you were saying.
Yes, that is the important question. There is a my country, right or wrong, rah-rah patriotism. That's literally just follow the flag till I die. And I think there's also being proud of the many things about American culture. And to some people that might be like churches and barbecues. To some people, it might be like the incredible ethnic melting pot that is much of America, particularly urban America. I know some people, feel that they love American values, but are frustrated with the country itself or whichever government is in charge. And so for myself, the American values that I love and am proud of, and in situations where comparing myself as a citizen of this country as compared to other countries, I feel very lucky. And that much of that has to do with the Constitution. Much of that has to do with checks and balances. Much of that has to do with free speech. That the army can't post up in your house, like things like that. And I see all of those things under attack. And as I also mentioned in the column, I've always been impressed by America's sometimes glacially slow, but then often very fast afterwards, progress in civil rights and social justice situations. Sorry for using social justice together. But I see all of those things, the things that I am most proud of, the things that make me go, yeah, America is cool. It is amazing that I was born in America at this moment in time. I am lucky as hell. I see these things under attack, and I see them not only under attack legislatively and, by the executive branch, but like culturally. That that maybe we shouldn't have a free press. Maybe there are differences between the races and some are poisoning the blood of America. That's the kind of stuff that I go, how can I possibly say I'm extremely proud when that's the winning dominant culture?
Right. Well, we have our poll quote, by the way. Seamus, our producer, Anthony Fisher, says some ethnicities are poisoning the blood of America. I'm interested in this feeling about patriotism and what it means to be patriotic. And back in, I think it was January, I had a good sort of discussion about this on Blue Sky with a friend of mine. One of the things that bugs me is the way patriot has been sort of conceded to the right in the same way that family values has. And I don't think we should do that. I think it's patriotic to want to make your country better. And it's not the same thing as nationalism, which is, as you said, that's my country, right or wrong. To me, that's not patriotism, that's nationalism. And if you conflate those two things, that's when, like you said, that's when you really get into trouble. That's when you look at the examples of countries that have done that, and that's where you start looking at totalitarian or authoritarian regimes etc. So that's why I really liked your piece. And I really think that it's important that we not cede the word patriotism or the concept of patriotism to the right, the way we always seem to let them frame the debate.
Yeah, I mean, I've like, and again, I don't consider like, I know you've taken a journey to the left. I still don't consider myself like explicitly of the left. I certainly think that in
Right.
Trump, there is a not both sides, but true sides kind of situation. I concede to that, but I can't really speak for what the left has done as far as, rejecting like the image of patriotism. Because as we've seen, like the dominant voices of the activist left kind of ebb and flow through the years. Sometimes it comes from
Right.
academia, sometimes it comes straight from activism, sometimes it comes from, who knows? But it's definitely, in the last 20 years, post-Iraq war, post George W. Bush, like, yeah, and we all lived through that, like where the flag pin was, at first it was solidarity, then it wasn't. And it's never
Right.
back,
Yeah.
in Obama's first term, that's what it was about. That was like the last time, like, think like the broader left really took on like patriotism, like,
Mhm.
you know, yes, we can, it was optimism about America. Whereas
Yeah.
MAGA was America sucks right now, but in this mythical
Right.
past, it was great,
Yeah.
So like the message of hope, like, I mean, like, I know Kamala Harris didn't have the easiest set of cards handed to her, with 100
Right.
days president, but, joy, I think, was the theme, but joy is like vague, whereas
Right.
hope in America, like, hey, like, listen, you're just not looking right. Like, America's got these things going for it, and you can take advantage of these things, and we can all take advantage of these things. And I mean, I will say that, and this always happens predictably when you're a free speech person, but the left is rediscovering free speech. The left is rediscovering due process, so if they hold on to that kind of stuff and don't abandon it when they're back in power, if they're hopefully back in power at some point, that, that's just healthy in a democracy.
Yeah.
Uh, that would be like, I wish the left would embrace like these things, these civil liberties that we all enjoy, that have helped innumerable civil rights be earned. I wish they would hold on to those as like America. Like, this is America. You're like the regime that would not allow us these rights is not America. But what do I know?
Yeah. Well, one of the things you wrote in your piece was you wrote, I haven't given up on America. I'm just not sure yet if America has given up on itself. First of all, settle down, Aaron Sorkin. I mean, but I actually did when I read that
I know
line, I
you were
was
a
like,
fan of Aaron Sorkin too, though.
I am a fan of Aaron Sorkin within limits, but when I like him, I love him. And that did strike me as a line that you would hear in like West Wing or
I've actually never seen a full episode of West Wing. I swear to God.
yeah. No, no, I believe you, but it did strike me that way. But it's also it's an interesting thought. That you're just not sure if America has given up on itself, because it really does feel like in a lot of ways we look at what's going on. We look at what's going on with the detention slash concentration camp in Florida. We look at what's going on in Los Angeles. We look at what's going on with the, as you mentioned, due process before, the fact that we seem to be chucking
Mhm.
that in the garbage. And it is really hard to tell if America has just given up on itself. All of these things are self-inflicted.
In self-reflective moments, I concede that sometimes, I may put this question to people, intensely, but like the things you mention, each one of those things, I would ask Americans, any American, where is your line? What is enough? Is it the, literal secret police that have, now been ultra funded for a decade, who literally grab people up off the streets without due process? We've seen videos where they actually grab U.S. citizens who somehow are able to prove their U.S. citizenship and are just let go, but without any, documentation of who just roughed them up and threw them on the floor, and, under
Yeah.
what authority they had to do that. So many examples that we can choose from, but these were things that were not normal, and now they are. They're just
Yeah.
normal. Like, and this could possibly transition us into another conversation, but like, there are still people talking about COVID tyrants, and
Right.
green
Right.
card and all that stuff while this is happening. So
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would say it's less about like, oh, you hypocrites, and more like, America, have you given up on yourself? It's like, it's one thing to just not paying attention to this kind of stuff, but if you are and you're not, and you're fighting a battle 4 years ago, then like with friends like the
Yeah.
Tunisian.
There's a term on Twitter called subtweeting
Yeah.
when you're calling out people without naming them. I feel like this is now subcasting. I think I'm
Yes.
going to call this now. But it leads me to what I want to switch gears to, which is over the weekend, Elon Musk said he was considering forming a new political party. He did one of his bullshit Twitter polls and then announced the people have spoken. A new political party is needed in America to represent the 80% in the middle. So he now says he's starting a party called the America Party. So
Right.
I want to talk about that 80% in the middle, which of course is not an actual statistic, but it put me in a mind of something you and I and others often talk about, and that's sort of the so-called politically homeless or politically tribeless. Because this is the same shtick, isn't it? Pretending you're in the middle, pretending you're part of a silent majority. That's what he's trying to do here, right?
I don't know that that's what he's trying to do. I mean, he's that
Okay.
line, the 80% in the middle, has been used by everybody, like from Bill
Yeah.
Maher, 80%
Right.
in the,
Okay.
he's clear, like there are a lot of people who, will say that, they're politically tribeless, they're politically homeless. I actually fail that way myself, although I'd never use that phrase for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But everything, like, it might be like a Nerf ball tossed to the right every once in a while, and they're otherwise, exclusively supporting MAGA, Trump. Even if they make fun of Trump, it's like in the, subtlest way, or I mean, not subtle, but just like the gentlest way. I don't even
Right.
think Elon Musk is like, I know he says stuff like the 80% in the middle, but what I think is he's an extremist among extremists.
Right.
Like
Right.
his version, like. Now, granted, he and Bannon are at odds, but that doesn't mean that one of them is more centrist than the other.
Right.
It
Yeah.
just means that, like, Elon Musk's got this techno-fascist libertarianist streak, and Steve Bannon's got a blood and soil nationalist streak. It doesn't. You couldn't put one of those in the 80% in the middle. So I just
Right.
think Elon, like, because he's even said in some of those tweets the other day that he's only trying to flip a few districts. He's not even looking at the White House. What he wants to do is cleave off a small portion of presumably the Republican Party that is the Elon wing of the Republican Party, which um, honestly is like, I still don't think it'll work, but like, it's more cogent strategy that I've seen from Elon in a while.
Uh,
Like, it's actually like less, like, tomorrow we're going to overthrow and have, everybody's going to be the America Party. Like I said, I still don't think it'll work, but I actually think he's being kind of open about the fact that it's not really centrism. It's just like, we want, I want to get some Republicans who would vote against a bill like that. I'm going to get some Republicans that will, you know, do more EV tax breaks, things like that.
But he does say that one of the platforms of the American Party will be free speech, and I'm assuming you believe him.
Oh yeah, man. You saw what he did with Twitter. He's never throttled anybody. He's never shut down accounts or, sued his critics. No, yeah, like, there's no more free speechy guy than Elon
Yeah,
Musk. Yeah.
yeah. Um, when I said that the 80% of the middle thing, that it reminded me of the shtick that the politically homeless claim. What I meant really was exactly sort of what you said, that the people who call themselves politically homeless, politically tribeless, they are generally, if they criticize the right, it's a, more in sorrow than anger, or
Yep.
like it's a Nerf ball, like you said. When they criticize the left, it's straight up vitriol.
Yeah.
uh
It's the end of Western civilization.
right, exactly. And to me, that's exactly, yes, Musk is out there, he's mad because the big bullshit bill doesn't have Tesla subsidies anymore, but he is not in the middle. I agree. He is far from the middle, but these people like to portray themselves as sort of above the fray
Yep.
and sort of condescendingly look down on everyone else. And they're like, I'm just a rational person here, calling balls and strikes. And when really they're not, as you said.
Again, I don't even like want to go too far into my own personal, political, alienation, but I truly do feel politically tribalist, even in the time of Trump. When you see an entire movement of people say that they're politically tribalist or politically homeless, and they agree on about 95% of things, and they all have a laser focus on the same enemy, and
Yeah.
also really not, to a person, do not consider Trump a threat. If they do not actively support him, which most of them have finally come around to doing,
Right.
they, will just continue to minimize or what about, or like, bring up, Stacey Abrams was a sore loser about losing the,
Right.
Georgia gubernatorial race, and that's the same thing as what Trump did. But, like, to me, that's a litmus test. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's a phenomenon that, like, seems to be waning. I mean, there's been a lot of articles about, like, the collapse of the anti-woke media subscription model. I don't keep track of that kind of stuff, so I don't really know, but it would stand to reason that, like, once you're in power, once you literally have, like, there are people in this movement, like, free press columnists who are literally in the Trump administration now.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
how you can possibly say that, like, the man is keeping you down, and that you're espousing bold truths, and that you are, like you said, above the fray, not in the fray.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Something you write about and post about often is the people you call the civility cops. Is this, what do you mean by this? And, Seinfeld voice, who are these people?
Well, I mean, it's a rich tapestry of people. Too many guilty to name, too few innocent to leave out. So I'll just leave it with that. Um, the reason I termed that phrase is because as the internet and as Twitter got really disgusting in the mid 2010s, I did actually see, among what, for lack of a better phrase, the heterodox community, what I thought was an actually earnest attempt at civil discourse, like talking to your political enemies. And I really did see that a lot, and I appreciated that, and I got into that myself. I really came to believe that, like, just as long as you're talking to these people and they're not, like, literally espousing eugenics, like, keep the discourse going. But then I noticed, during the rise of Trump, and although the 10 years since that, like, the tone policing, the accusations of hatred and condescension and all that always only went in one direction, at the left, and not just
Yeah.
extreme left or the activist left, but, like, mainstream Democrats, the media. It was always like, oh, gasp, they're being so mean, and at the same time, like, this psychotic, like basically alt-right meme culture became mainstream, and it's in the White House now. So the civility cops will police any failure of decorum, and yet when you literally have, like, overt racism, calls for violence, fascism, ad hominem insults, naming people. Remember the whole, like, okay groomer thing? All of these
Yeah.
people are in good standing with what I call the civility cops.
Right.
Oh, and I've written about that. In the run up to the election, I remember there was, Trump had that racist rally at Madison Square Garden, and then Biden also had that line where you may or may not think he called Trump's supporters garbage. You know,
Yeah.
depending on where the apostrophe is. I never, really.
Right.
Um, but again, even right around that time, I was days before the election. I just could not believe that, among, a decent amount of people who I have respect for in the heterodox circles, that the the Trump had some dirty jokes at a rally, get over it, and Biden is literally the reason this country is tearing itself apart. That,
Yeah.
and it's amazing that that kind of stuff still, we're almost 6 months into Trump 2.0, and that's still the vibe.
Yeah. It's absolutely wild. Anthony, thanks so much as always for coming on. And folks, you can check out Anthony's writing at MSNBC.com.
That's correct.
Yay. I got it right. Anthony, thanks again. I really appreciate it. Always good talking to you.
My pleasure. Thanks.